Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 266. My name is NBZ, and you might recognize I'm a bit famous now, Bally, because I've been up in lights in the stars. My voice is now officially on the PlayStation YouTube channel, so bow down to me. It's been a fun time. No, I did a voiceover for a trailer, Bally, and
awesome.
now it's on the PlayStation YouTube channel, and you can watch it.
Let's get the plug in now. What's the game? When's it coming?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I should mention, absolutely. We have a game. If you don't know, I work for a video games publisher. We publish games. It's cool. There's a game called Balatro, which is a roguelike poker game. It's excellent. I think it's fantastic. I'm a shill. Don't believe anything I say, of course, but everyone should buy it. And it's coming to Switch. It's coming to Switch on February 20th, Bally.
February 20th.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, I did voiceover for our trailer for it. So you can go and have a look at that on various places on the internet if you would like. But yeah, it's great, and I'm looking forward to people checking it out. But
super exciting.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I have also been, hanging out in Hawaii recently, because there's this thing where, I'm telling you, like, I've got to not buy games anymore because
it's too many long games coming out.
Too long games. And I'm like, look, I love Yakuza, but it's gonna come out on Game Pass. It's gonna get cheaper, all this stuff. And then these reviews come out and they're like, it's the best one. And I'm like, fuck's sake, man. And I love the series, right? I think this is the problem of Game Pass getting you into a series is I play all of them, not for free, but through the subscription, and don't pay for any of them. And then I get into this, and then I catch up to the series, and now I'm in this place where I'm like, well, now I'm a fan. Now I have to buy them all at full price when they come out, basically. Yeah. So there's a drawback to getting into a series like that. But yeah, I've been playing a bunch of Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth.
The first Like a Dragon, it came to Game Pass after release, not on release, right?
Yes. So yes. Yakuza Like a Dragon, I should distinguish, the 7th game in the series.
Yeah.
Came out, and then I think about a year later came to Game Pass.
Okay. Yeah.
The difference is that Yakuza Ishin last year came out and was like a 6-month turnaround from release to Game Pass. But then also, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, was a day one Game Pass game. So it's a bit all over the shop in terms of consistency of what's coming where. But here's the thing that tipped the scales, Bally, is that
it's only digital, right?
Well, yes, that's true. But I realized that buying it on Steam means that I could also play it on Steam Deck. And that means that
cool.
with the RPG-ness of this game, right, the run around and leveling up, that's so perfect, because I'm like, oh, okay, if I need to do some grinding, it's fine. It's on Steam Deck in bed. That's the perfect way to do it. So actually, I think I'm going to get through this game a lot faster than I did the previous ones, because I now have it handheld and I can take it to bed with me and then do an extra hour, every day, which helps chip away.
It does sound a lot like a modern day Earthbound. If you simplify Earthbound as a Japanese take on America, it sounds like this game's got that in spades, and it's obviously an RPG. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
the unique thing I think about Yakuza Like a Dragon, again, the 7th game that came out previously, is that it was we talk about this a lot of how Earthbound is really one of those only games that's like an RPG and just like a normal world setting. Of course, Earthbound's not normal at all, but we're talking about cities and kids in a 90s aesthetic, right?
Pre-Pokemon.
And exactly, and this series is very much it's just people in Japan or in these other places. And you're right, this one going to Hawaii now means that it is very much a modern day Earthbound in its it's kind of hey, the jobs that you get, the job classes are chef or teacher,
actual
or
jobs,
lawyer, or what? Yeah, exactly. The actual jobs become your job classes.
It's sorcerer's not an actual job. Come on, it's just
right.
a weird word to associate with. with a
totally,
or something.
Yeah, exactly. We've always had the job classes always come from classic Final Fantasy games, right? And they're always talking about wizards and things like that. But yeah, these are literal professions that you then have fun abilities around because you get them and you actually use them. And I think this is actually this game's been great. So I'm 8 hours in or so. I'm having a good time, and I think I feel only a couple of hours ago the game really opened up. Honestly, I think the first 5 hours is about 80% cutscenes and 20% me playing the game. That's not even an exaggeration. Like, it is so heavy on the story, like these games usually are, but it's always really good. So it's very exciting. So
we'll talk a lot about that on Nintendo Show.
Yes, we'll get into February. It there. But it does make me be like, oh, maybe I should go to Hawaii. It's a cool place. They've got poke there. Nice. That's the real reason I want to go. Is just poke, right? That's the best thing in the world. So
have to.
So maybe that gets added to the list. But yes, hello, we're here to talk about the video games of Nintendo. Bally, would you like to tell the fine folks at home what we are going to be talking about today?
For the first segment, we're going to be talking about the games that we have been playing, and that's only going to be one game. It's Prince of Persia, and we're also going to have a little spoiler section for that. It might not be little, it might be a bit longer.
Yeah.
It's going to be split in two. It's going to be non-spoilers, and then we'll make it very clear, state it very clearly. We're going to switch into spoilers. And then for the second segment, we're going to cover a few emails.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not very usual these days that both Bally and I come to the show and we have both finished a game that came out a week ago, essentially. It did come out a week ago, right?
Yes, but we both got it one day early.
That's true. So, there was a weird situation with Prince of Persia. So, I think I mentioned the end of last episode that I'd played the demo, and that demo had like stuff from the start of the game, but what you could do is you could go onto either the Switch eShop or to whatever store and buy the deluxe version of the game, and that means that instead of having to wait until the 18th, you could get it on the 15th, I believe. So you could get it on the Monday as opposed to the Thursday, essentially, basically leapfrogging the release date, as AAA games have been wanting to do this quote-unquote early access type thing where they're like...
Which is the worst phrase for it when there is already something called early access, which is a little bit different.
It is, yeah.
3 days early.
It's very strange, but I decided I wasn't going to... So here's the other thing that happened in between. It's like I realized if you go to Ubisoft Plus, their whole membership thing, you could pay for a month of Ubisoft Plus, and you would be able to basically also get it 3 days early, because if you're subscribed to their service, guess what? They also, there's an incentive for you to subscribe to that service. And then I was like, but then, here's the issue. This game is a handheld first game for me, and any Metroidvania, any game that I know I'm going to be spending time listening to a podcast, going around a map, if it's not handheld, it just is less interesting to me. And having played the demo, Switch version ran like butter. I think this is one of the best Switch ports ever, maybe, of a third-party game.
I heard someone on a podcast, I cannot remember which podcast, saying it was designed ground up for Switch.
Yes, I believe that is the case, right? And that makes sense, because that's where your core audience is. Like, this game feels like Metroid Dread in another skin in a lot of ways, right? And we can get into that, but yeah, I think Switch is where I wanted to play it. But you're right, this tangent leading up to the fact that we both got the game delivered actually a day before the game came out, so I did have like a 5-hour head start on everybody playing it on the Wednesday as opposed to the Thursday. But all that said, Bally, Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, I guess just to give people a top level, Prince of Persia IP has been around for years, and started back in the early days. Jordan Mechner did the original one, and then the most famous one I would say is The Sands of Time, which came out on GameCube and PS2 during that era. And there's been lots of them since. Ubisoft kind of dropped the franchise around the 360 period because Assassin's Creed became their main thing, and Assassin's Creed in a lot of ways is like a successor to Prince of Persia. And then Ubisoft just turned into their modern iteration, which is just do 25 Assassin's Creed games. And so this is a new game that is a Metroidvania take, side-scrolling Metroidvania take on Prince of Persia, using that IP, but making a brand new game that is in a totally different genre. And I mean, I think it's a fucking success in lots of different ways, but I'd love to hear, Bally, your kind of overall thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, I got the game on Series X, and I only found out after buying it on Series X that it was designed ground up for Switch, so I was hoping for a bit more flashy 4K visuals, but if you actually are judging the game by its character models and this kind of thing, it's very clearly designed for Switch. It is not pushing the limits of resolution and facial design and these kinds of things. So I definitely made a mistake not getting the Switch version. And I can also say I had maybe 4 quite big bugs on at least on the Series X version. So one was it repeated a cutscene when I went to the same location, which was just weird. And then I thought it might be some trippy thing related to the story, but wasn't. There was also a boss that just froze and would not take any more damage, and I could like jump around the screen doing more damage to the boss. No, I wasn't actually able to do damage. I could attack the boss loads, and then it just locked, so I had to quit out the game. There was also a side quest where every time I tried to start the side quest, the game would just hang, and I'd have to quit out the whole game, reboot the whole thing. There was one other glitch I'm trying to remember now, but anyway, my point is, between those issues and not getting much benefit from having 4K, I probably should have got the Switch version. I just got this Xbox version because I do like 95% of my gaming in front of a TV, so I thought it was just the more sensible thing, but not on this occasion. But anyway.
No, yeah, and it's very rare that happens where the Switch version, I wouldn't say it's superior necessarily, but like it is designed for it, and it feels like the best place to play it.
There are periods where Caroline is speaking to her mum with Bally Jr. throughout the week, and I go into the other room, and not having a Switch I could bring with me for those periods, I was like, right, damn, I should have got a Switch.
yeah, a little bit of regret saying it, yeah.
But yeah, even for those small chunks of time, it was like, damn, I could have done that. But anyway,
yes,
I think this game is absolutely stellar. Yes. I think that the two biggest highlights for me are the platforming and the boss fights. I think that if you're judging the game alone on those two things, it's one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played. Like, I think it is really, really, really impressive. And I was saying this to you at the time when we were playing MZ, like, the progression feels a bit more Castlevania-like, and I think the best way of describing that is there's a real power jump based on upgrades based on the currency, and that's something that you isn't the same with Metroid. You do not gain a currency from defeating enemies that are then spent on anything in Metroid games.
No, it's not a full RPG thing like Symphony of the Night, where Symphony of the Night you collect XP and then your stats go up and you have armor to equip. But it is a light version of that.
A lighter version of that.
There's an amulet system that is based around upgrading with currencies that you find, and there's obviously like an upgrade to your kind of progression abilities as you go through, but yeah, I'd say like the amulets is really where the quote-unquote RPG systems are, and like you're just upgrading your individual weapons, your sword, your bow.
It's more the individual weapons I was getting to, but yeah, so a game like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, you're doing those same things. You have amulet equivalents, you also have currency gained from defeating enemies that are used to upgrade abilities. So I guess that's more similar to Castlevania in some ways. But again, it is quite light. I still really loved the game, even though it had a lot of that. There was maybe like one boss I got to, and I got absolutely destroyed. And I thought, I've got to go away and explore and upgrade myself. I need to get my health up. I need to get my attack boosted a bit. And it felt fine. I was happy to do that. And I think that is down to how good the movement feels, how good the combat feels, how much I wanted to platform around and find secrets and explore the map. And I should say I beat the game in 20 hours and found 66% of everything. So there was still like a big chunk of stuff I never really found or discovered, but it felt like the perfect balance of you will struggle to mainline this because you need to get more powerful versus you have to explore the entire map, otherwise you cannot beat the game. It was like a nice balance between those two, and it is up there with the best of the best for me. Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that for me it's like a half an inch below Ori and Metroid Dread. I mean, it's very difficult to like take those thrones because
for me so much of it is thematic, to be honest.
Yes, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of Metroid's atmosphere is unmatched in a lot of ways, and I'm just a mark for everything to do with side-scrolling Metroid, so Dread for me was a dream game in many aspects, and so it's almost impossible. I think that like you said, you had some bugs. I definitely had some bugs as well. There's a polish aspect in Nintendo's games where like Dread was just completely flawless, and I just never encountered anything. And the movement in Metroid is still, I think, superior personally. But this game gets as close as you can possibly get to the line of Ori and Metroid, which are like, again, movement is the king for me when it comes to these types of games, And this is so fucking fluid. It is just absolutely sublime, from the way in which you can slide to then jump out of the slide to keep your momentum going. It's almost you know how people in Ocarina of Time just constantly roll as Link? Like, I am one of those people who's fidgety with games. You know, I like to go fast. Obviously, it's a meme with the show. Fast. I'm always going fast.
Got your Mega Man bosses in here.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I moved through this game was like... ground dash into jump into air dash into ground dash. Like, I felt like I was pressing buttons every time I moved constantly, and it felt great doing that. And over the course of the game, you ramp up those movement abilities, not to the level of like a screw attack and space jump combo, but pretty fucking close when it comes to speed of traversal. And I think I was really impressed by was the places you retraverse in this world once you have abilities, how many things you can then shortcut or completely bypass once you have brand new things into your arsenal. It just feels so fantastic to jump past an entire sequence of like hardcore platforming that you had to do to get through this sequence before, and now you're like, nope, shortcut, because I can now just go there instantly, basically. It feels tremendous to just exist and move through the world. And I know a lot of people have been talking about how they wish there were a few more fast travel points, and I can kind of see that as a bit of a critique, but to me this is very much like a Spider-Man, where like, why would you use fast travel to me? Like, I simply don't see a lot of the point. There's definitely, the map is huge to the point where, yes, if it's something's on the other side of the map, then you definitely want to fast travel. And I was using that consistently. But if it's something where I'm like, okay, this is across in this other area, it will literally take me about 30 seconds to get there, because that's how fast you move and how quick and agile the prince is.
And they're very much wanting you to go past enemies, defeat those enemies, gain the money from those enemies to upgrade your character. Like, that is quite an important part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I said the prince, I misspoke there, because you don't play as the prince in this game. You play as a character called Sargon, who is one of the immortals, the 7 immortals, who they kind of set up at the beginning of the game, have this kind of bombastic cutscene, this opening of like, it almost goes to Tsushima, right? Like this storming of a beach. And
you know, the prince is also a different prince to the other Prince of Persia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I looked this up. So it's Prince Hassan in this game, and I can't remember the name of the other guy, but it's not Prince Hassan, basically.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it feels like they're kind of creating their own world, their own mythos here, which is cool. But yeah, I think like there is a story set up here, and there are cutscenes and there are character moments and things like that. I thought it was good for what it was. Like, I wasn't like super engaged. Like, I'm one of those people who, if in a game like this, if you put down lore things for me to sit and read for 2 minutes, I'm just not, I can't do it. Like, I really tried. I was like, I read one and I was like, this is not going to happen. I
knew for a fact you were not going to engage with that lore. I honestly didn't either. They were too long to read, and in a game where you are zipping around so fast paced, I was like, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people like shitting on the story and being like, well, this makes it worse. And like, I just never ever in my entire fucking life will ever care about a story in a Metroidvania like this. Like, I thought Metroid Dread had a great story, but like, that's for a Metroidvania. There's like 2 cutscenes and like,
I think Metroid Dread did have a great story.
Yeah, and
I think Will of the Wisps had a good story. It was predominantly vibes, but it still works really well for that game. Like,
absolutely,
I really loved it.
And I think, like, sure, they all have, like, frame narratives, essentially, but it's never going to negatively impact my feeling of a game like this, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm totally cool with what it was, and I thought there's some cool stuff.
I think the story did well and had some good twists, and I was pretty satisfied by the end.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I think the kind of moving around, the getting around, the running around is real good in this game. That's definitely kind of a peak of it. I think just the level design itself and the way in which it has things that loop back. Obviously, the one thing that people are talking about with this game is the entire system of taking pictures on the map to indicate, like, this is the thing that's here. I can go back and remember now because I made a picture of it, a snapshot. And, like, it's one of those things that I've always thought about. I always think about when I'm playing Metroid Fusion, because there's this one part in Metroid Fusion where in Sector 2, the tropical area, you go down from the save room to the left and you go through that door, and then an event happens that permanently closes that door for the rest of the game. but the map never updates to tell you that. And so I, for the rest of my life, after doing that like multiple times, always remember that I cannot go back through that door, and I have to keep that in my brain, because otherwise when I'm retraversing to do 100%, I'll think, oh, I can just leg through that. Because, you know, when you're doing 100% in a game like this, you're looking at the map and you're thinking, what's the route I'm going to take to get to this point I need to get to? And you're often looking for the fastest route. And so things like that, so often in Metroidvanias, they are not indicated on the map of like, is this door open or closed? Is it permanently closed for the rest of the game? What ability do I need to get there? And it is this mental map of, can I remember what it was? And there are so many instances of me, and I don't mind this in Metroidvanias, I think this turns off a lot of other people, so many instances I can think of in other games where I go to a spot and I'm like, all right, yeah, I still can't do that because I don't have the double jump yet. And the way in which this streamlines things is so fantastic, where you can plop these down. There's limited numbers of them, but you get more as you go. But
are you in favor of that decision, or do you think they should have been unlimited?
I feel like there's not really a drawback to making them unlimited, if I'm honest.
I think it was a weird decision.
It's a slightly weird decision. I think it's like making you make choices about what things you think are important, because you do still have the markers to put down as well, which I did use at some points for certain things. But just the utility of it to be like, I have no idea what this thing is, I'm just going to screenshot it. And then eventually the satisfaction of getting a new ability, realizing what it does, and then looking at your map and being like, there's like 5 screenshots here that I can go back to. And it created such a great loop of, now I know where I need to go specifically with this power, which I played in exploration mode, so it didn't like put markers on my map or anything. And was a really helpful way of realizing, well, this is the actual area I need to go to next, essentially, because this is the ability that I need to get there, and the game is allowing me the tools to remember that for myself, especially for a game that is, I'd say, slightly longer than most Metroidvanias. It's 20 hours-ish.
It's quite a lot longer than most Metroidvanias.
Yeah. I feel like, unless you're Hollow Knight, right, which is like the most kind of expanded one. But yeah, that's very true.
I played in Guided, and I'm glad I played in Guided. I don't think it guides you particularly that much.
It mainly just puts markers on the general position.
It's just map, right? A waypoint on a map, which I feel like lots of Metroidvanias have done.
I feel like Ori does that, right?
Ori definitely does that, and that's all I want to know. I thought it was perfect. That's all I want to know. That's all I wanted to know. I just want to know the general direction I should be aiming broadly to get to, and I thought it worked well. Yes, the photos are really good, but I'm pretty sure, like, say, Metroid Dread, all the doors are like labeled as like,
right, if it's a specific color or one that you don't have access to, or things like that. I think they do a better job in Dread, definitely. And I think because of the abilities that you have in that game, I think it's easier to map to be like, oh, I know that looks like a morph ball kind of area, so I need to have that to go there.
And I think that, yes, it's cool to have the ability to take photos and you can do it manually yourself, but to be honest, I think the Dread model of just, this is the color of the door, and Metroid Prime's done it before as well, where this is the color of the door, that's the color of the door, it just is that color. You'll know when you get, like, say, the ice beam or whatever, and you'll be able to unlock that door. And I think that, yes, it's cool to take the photos, but maybe, like, because you had the ability to take photos in Prince of Persia, they didn't skimp out, but they chose not to delineate clearly on the map what types of doors and platforms, etc., to get to next places.
Yeah, and I think it's harder for them because their abilities and their things that you get through are not as delineated in that same structured way that Metroid is. So
yes,
it's more
Metroid's
difficult.
all about the beams, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Predominantly.
But the thing that I also really like this game does, and did save me a few snaps, was there are often arrows that are pointing on the map that says, you can only get through this entrance by going from this direction. And
they
so
were perfect.
If you come across one of those, like that, like little annotation does such a good job of just being like, there's no way you're going to come through this way. No matter what you try, you're never going to come through this way. It has to be opened from the other side. Yeah. And I think that is such a smart way of saying, don't go this way. You'll find your route back there by going some other route, essentially. Which I think is also a problem in Metroidvanias of people not knowing, you know, can I get through this or not? I think they did a lot of innovation in terms of the map design in this game and just letting people know what they needed to at what point in time. yeah, I feel like it's going to be widely adopted now by a lot of these games because it's such a useful feature. And frankly, I think a lot of people were like, I remember in some other games I've played on Switch where I just take screenshots of areas because I'm like, I just want to remember this for later, you know?
Yeah. I've done that as well, for sure.
Yeah.
I talked earlier how I think it's predominantly vibes and theming that is making me prefer, say, Metroid Dread and Will of the Wisps.
Yes.
I would have loved to have seen them lean more away from photorealism and gone way bigger on a art style. I don't know what art style necessarily, but like the Persian theme itself, I think is great. It like the mythology and some of the creatures that you're fighting and things like that, it's all fantastic. But like, it was this game could have been far prettier had they just gone for an art style. And I feel like because we're in this new era of 4K, etc., when you're going for photorealism, you kind of need to be more impressive than what they went for.
Would you say this is, because I wouldn't argue this is photorealism. I say this is like stylized in a Fortnite-y kind of like cartoonish aesthetic in a way.
It is stylized. I wanted it way more stylized.
Sure, yeah. Lean into an actual like full aesthetic in a way.
Yeah, full aesthetic, because there were aspects that were going for photorealism that felt a little bit dated, but that's I don't know what the budget of the team, etc., and all that was. I get that.
Yeah, probably not that high.
Yeah, and they were designing Switch up, and that's the important thing. The most important thing is how this game runs, etc., and it runs fantastically well, other than the bugs I obviously mentioned. But like, I for me, that's where Metroid Dread is just a complete package. Obviously, Ori is just another level when it comes to art design and style and music and like the drama, like the build. Like there's something about that game that is just unmatched in the Metroidvania sphere for me personally. But other than that, like I said, I think this game might be stronger than those other ones, especially on the platforming front. I thought some of the abilities that you're getting, and we can talk about this later when we do spoilers, but some of the abilities you're getting, and there are parts of this game where you have to platform incredibly well just to progress the game. I'm pretty sure I
was surprised by some of the mandatory segments where I was like, are most people going to be able to do this? Because this feels like an optional segment in a lot of ways.
I did one the wrong way and sent you the message, and you were like, Bally, I think you've done it wrong.
You broke it. Yeah, you literally broke
it. You've speed run this one little scenario. I was like, oh shit, okay, right, no, I see what you mean. It kind of made sense to me on your WhatsApp, like how to do that. But this game is not scared to replace a boss fight with a platforming challenge, and I think that is awesome. Like, so few games can say they do that, and I was a little worried that all the toughest platforming would be saved for bonus stuff. And to be honest, I don't think some of the bonus platforming segments were any more or less challenging than some of the mainline game platforming segments, and I respect the game a lot for that.
No, I was actually I was slightly disappointed. We can talk about in spoilers what it is, but there's a thing at the end called the Impossible Climb. It's supposed to be the hardest challenge. I looked up on Google afterwards because I was like, is this the hardest thing in the game? And it's all a load of articles being like, how to do the hardest thing, the Impossible Climb. And I did it like in under 10 minutes, and my second try I did it, and I was like, that was it? That was all I had to do. So I don't know. Maybe we're quite good at platformers, and so maybe that plays into it. But I did hope for some kind of end game platforming challenge that was like a 15-minute non-stop, like Galaxy 2 end level type of shit, right? Because I think this game has the tools to do that. And I actually find like there are some of the middle of the game platforming sections that were harder than that final end game thing that I did. Which is really interesting. And I mean, on the point of theme and kind of aesthetic, I do think they do an amazing job of leaning into the whole idea of the kind of death traps that Prince of Persia is associated with historically, of cool. The rotating blades and the kind of like swinging back and forth, kind of like pointy spiked things, like swinging on those kind of poles and getting the momentum between them, and a lot of the kind of late game stuff where you're switching different things. I think they create that feel of a gauntlet, like a classic kind of TV, like Gladiators, right? Like it feels like a Gladiators gauntlet in a very fun way that I think added a lot to the experience. And every time I came across one of those, I was like, all right, very excited to just get through this, because it's just super satisfying to pull off those movement tricks and just move around.
Yeah, it thematically worked really well. And there are like some incredible platforming challenges in the game, like Hollow Knight, and there's just a room full of spikes, and it's a bit like, I've not really seen many spikes in this game up till this point, but now all of a sudden, because it's a platforming thing, the spikes have appeared, whereas Prince of Persia is a lot more bold about, well, there's death traps everywhere. You're trying to fight for your life here. This is kind of how it is.
I never thought Hollow Knight had amazing platforming. I think it has serviceable platforming, and so I never
serviceable.
Well, you know, it's
just waiting for Silk Song with all that stylish platforming.
Well, absolutely, that's the thing. Like, Hollow Knight is built around combat, really. Like, that's the thing that it's so good at, and that's its strength. And a lot of people do like the Path of Pain in Hollow Knight. And I never wanted to attempt that because I don't feel like Hollow Knight gives you the tools to be great at platforming in the way that these games do. Right? I would say that Ori and Prince of Persia and Metroid are all at the top of my sphere because they prioritize platforming as a goal, as a thing, and I think they are built for it, and they give you everything you need to be adept at it.
I'm not sure Dread prioritizes platforming.
I would argue that the Shine Spark stuff that game does is very focused on it.
Oh, the Shine Spark stuff does, yeah. But I think that's like a niche thing you don't have to do. But
it is for me though. It's a very important. Like I'm the person who has played Metro Fusion 25 times, and
for me, the most niche of Metroid fans, it is an incredibly important thing. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But I think that there's a skill expression and a skill ceiling that Metroid with the Shine Spark platforming segments has, that Ori with its escape sequences has, and this game with its just multitude of tools has, that a game like Hollow Knight just simply lacks because it doesn't have the ability to give you that skill expression. And I say that skill expression comes a lot even stronger in the combat of Prince of Persia. Well, I was stunned by the amount of things you can do and chain together, and like there's the whole there's the hub you can go to where there's the shop and everything and the blacksmith, but there's also the kind of trials to kind of teach you how to play the game.
I didn't do any of those. Did you go back and do them all?
I can't believe you didn't do any of those, because it really shows you how you can do a lot of cool things in this combat that the game doesn't tell you otherwise. Like, did you know that you can the chakram, you can parry the chakram, and it knocks it back at the enemy, and you can permanently, like a boomerang, keep parrying the chakram as like a thing that you keep shooting back at enemies.
Did you use that, or
I never did? No, not in a fight. But I was like, this is crazy. There's
I've got
so
enough
many
on my mind in most of those boss fights without trying to parry the chakram. Thank you very much.
There is like a Devil May Cry feel to it in some ways, where it tells you if you do hold up and then attack, you'll throw them into the air, but also you'll jump up with them. Do 3 strikes, dash forward 3 strikes again. So I kept doing that thing where I was getting them up in the air, striking them 3 times, and then they get sent across. But if you dash immediately, you can keep them in the air and keep air juggling them. Like, there's so many little things that kind of that tutor teaches you that shows off how nuanced this stuff is. And like, it's down to the fact that when I started playing the demo, I was like, oh, this is fucking good. When I slid into an enemy and then hit the attack button, and it does a slide kick and knocks them up in the air, and I was like, that is the sickest shit I've ever seen in my life.
There's a whole like the devs of this game clearly love the genre and have learned so much between the amulets, the trees that give off like a yellow aura to give you hints as to where they are next, to the taking the photos, to the pure platforming, the boss design, like
even the girl who gives you the map kind of does the music whistle like the guy in Hollow Knight as well, right? Like
right, yeah, exactly. Like, they really are taking inspiration and using everything they've learned from all these other games to just create such a masterpiece of a game. Like, it is so well put together. Like, the attention to detail on stuff to please Metroidvania fans is through the roof, and that's not something I definitely got from, say, the first reveal trailer or everything or whatever. Like, this is something that people being positive on the demo and the great reviews, I was like, right, definitely have to get this game, and it's just hit it out of the park on like so many of these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting when we talk about this as a pastiche of ideas, because it's definitely taking stuff from the genre. I wouldn't say it's necessarily innovating in and of its own right. I would say the thing where it stands out from other games in this space is its combat, and I have seen videos on Twitter of people doing that kind of Devil May Cry shit, which is unbelievable and is incredibly cool.
Like Sargon has just been taken straight out of the Smash Brothers universe.
Really.
Like you could even, and this kind of stylized photorealism we described earlier, it's kind of like what Smash Brothers is going for as well. Like he feels like he could just straight out of that universe.
I feel like people are going to be asking for him for Smash when the next one comes out, right? But yeah, the movement of the feel of combat feels very platform fightery in a way, doesn't it? Like it has that kind of momentum and flow to it.
You can get the enemies up into the air, and then it's all about the aerial attacks. Like that's literally. So there was one fight, I'll just say, where there was a lot of aerial stuff hitting me, and I was like, is this what it feels like when MBZ is playing as Lucina and I'm Samus? Because I'm getting my ass kicked right now. It's not fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely has a bit of that vibe to it. But I think that despite it not having kind of like doing anything drastically new with the space, I don't think you need to do anything drastically new. I think Metroidvanias are kind of perfect already. Like
there's been so many, there's so much done. It's a harder genre to innovate on than potentially other genres, for sure.
And like playing this has just reminded me why this is my favorite genre in the world and why nothing ever comes close to it. It's just like there is a perfect distillation of I am moving through a space and finding stuff and having these little puzzle moments of like, oh, and it's what, again, this is a little bit contradictory. We always talk about like, we hate obfuscation and like, oh, you have to burn that bush in Zelda 1. I fucking love invisible walls or walls you don't know are invisible walls in Metroidvanias.
They're done well in this game. I think that you can work them out, and there are other clues and things to hint at where they are in a way that doesn't feel completely, oh my God, I was never going to do that in a million years kind of feeling.
Yeah, but like there's a feeling to finding upgrades and increasing your ability and power, and then knowing there's just so much. Also, it's a map fill-in game, right? That's the thing that gets my brain tickled. So there's just every element of video games that I love is just distilled in this perfect fucking thing. And if you just make one that is extremely polished and adds a little bit of different stuff, has a new flavor to it, it's gonna work for me every time. And I think that's why this is such an easy, like, I devoured this game in like 3 days. Of course I did, because that's what I do when a good one of these comes out that really just hits home for me. I think it's just very interesting, this game, in the context of Pal World and everything happening around that game, because I mean, in some ways, like, Pal World is also just taking things from other games and mashing them together into this weird soup.
It's like a boardroom designed, that game. It's like when you take a bit of Breath of the Wild and Fortnite and Pokemon and a survival game, and hey, would you look at that? It sold really well.
Oh, would you look at it? It's just like, it's probably sold another 1 million copies since we started recording this podcast. So it's interesting how that is being so chastised and Prince of Persia is being so elevated. I guess they're slightly different in that Pal World is taking lots of different genres and throwing them in, whereas Prince of Persia is looking at one genre and just taking influences from every good game.
I think the biggest criticism of Pal World, though, is the model of the Pokemon debate, and it's less about. I think because we've seen so many games that take little bits from other games, I think that's been more accepted in the kind of gaming community. It's the models and the question of, did they actually copy Pokemon models or not? The bigger issue.
Of course, that's the thing that takes up the most air.
Although this game feels like a reskinned Silk Song, to be honest.
Well, we've not played Silk Song yet.
I tweeted earlier, I was like, did they just release Silk Song in like a Persian skin? Like, is that what this game's going for? But
no, I'm of course we're both going to play Silk Song day one. There's no universe where we don't, but I feel like we land generally on, as we mentioned, the more platforming heavy side of the Metroidvania. For sure. Hollow Knight has always been more Souls inspired. It's always been more about the combat and the brutal boss fights and learning of patterns and very little health and just trying to squeeze your way through by just excellent skill in combat. And there's part of that in this game as well, but much of the combat in this game with bosses is you really have to learn what is parryable, what is not parryable, and what moves you have to use to avoid other moves, because you can take a lot of damage very quickly and die without realizing. And if you're not well prepared for it, that certainly can be the case. And I felt like at the beginning, it eases you into it. Like that big boar you fight at the beginning is like, he's going to do some easy attacks and he's going to be a very obvious parryable thing. And then you get to some bosses at the end where they're like, my timing for this parry is really tight. Like it's very tight to get this giant thing that's about to smack me to nail it with that kind of reversal. And that's the other thing I like about this game is that you get that risk reward with the parry, where if you do parry correctly, then you get a really cool animation and you get a bunch of health back. And it's on specific moves that enemies do. And oftentimes those specific kind of yellow parries are really tricky to nail down because they come from different directions or they're doing something slightly different with the animation.
You have to be facing the right way as well.
Exactly, you have to be facing the right direction, which is really important. So I think they make it a skill thing and something that you have to practice a lot, and something that, because there is a good variety of enemies in the game, there's a lot of learning to be done of like, what is this enemy going to do? What is its pattern? How do I work around it? And you get to those moments that you feel really good, where you are really like slicing, dashing across, dodging out of the way, getting a parry in there. And when it all comes together, you feel like very cool. It's a game where you can look very cool doing combat, essentially.
It's really impressive. Like you said, we lean more towards the platforming side of things. So I think one thing this game is just so great at is people like us who come from the more Celeste Ori side of things will absolutely love this game. But at the same time, the more roguelike Hollow Knight side of Metroidvania fans will also love this game. Like, it's managed to appeal to both audiences in a way that I would argue a lot of Metroidvanias maybe can't appeal to quite to the same level to both audiences. I think that's definitely a really fine balance this game has nailed. Yeah,
for sure. Like, it's not Souls combat, but like, I died a lot in this game, and
I died so much in this game. It is a brutal game, really.
Yeah,
hard
definitely.
Game.
There's definitely moments where I died and I was like, "Wow, that was a long way back to the tree." Like, there's some of that going on, and again, like I said, I didn't worry that much because you move so quickly that eventually, like, I had a rule of basically the first time I go through an area, I'll fight every enemy. If I go through it again, I'm just going to run past them a lot of the time, because otherwise it just becomes a little too tedious just going through all of those encounters.
I think I bought my last upgrade thing that I needed and needed money to buy right before the final boss. Like, the timing on the amount I explored and the amount of money I got / spent worked out perfectly. Like, it felt like an incredibly balanced game for that.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say I slightly overdid it in terms of I leant in a certain direction with my amulets and with maximizing my sword damage, where the final boss really wasn't a challenge at all. Like, I think I used maybe 2 potions and got through all phases of it without any trouble. First time, yeah. So yeah, I maybe just went a little bit overboard there, but I do think that all the fights that you do have are very cool from both a spectacle perspective, but from a pattern and combat and just like learning perspective, I think they all have really interesting kind of nuances to them. So
yeah, really cool.
Yeah, it is one of those games that immediately after I finished it, I jumped straight back in because I'm like, I got to go and collect some stuff. And I finished the game at 20 hours and 20 minutes or so, and I had 85% completion by the end. I was
going to say, wow, we had the same time, MBZ, but in that time you got 20% more than me. So
yeah, I think that's just, again, like the density of my exploration is very much like, I just move like a rocket through the world, so I'm just like trying to get places, essentially.
There are some really incredible vistas in the background that I was very much appreciating, especially in some of the higher areas with like the mountains and stuff that I definitely took in the sights and slowed it down.
We really haven't had many Metroidvanias at this kind of AAA quality level with 2.5D style. It's really Dread and this, and no other company has really come to the table for it, because I feel like this genre has almost been relegated to like, oh, well, that's what indie games do now, right?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And big companies, they only invest in the biggest things. And as unfortunate as that is, I think this just shows what you can do when you have a big team with a company with a lot of money put behind it to make something in this space. Like, there's so much more kind of you can make something this massive and like that has all this great art design to it in the background, and yeah, it feels like a production level kind of stepped up in a lot of ways. And I feel like I can't think of another company that would do a big AAA Metroidvania like this, side-scrolling.
It's just Nintendo, isn't it? Or
it's just Nintendo.
Like Tropical Freeze, which obviously isn't Metroidvania, but like, yeah, it's a real shame because as much as like I think it's leaned a little more too much to the photorealism, I still think this game looks incredible. Like it looks great, and like I do love 2.5D as much as I love a full-on art style with like say an Ori or something. Like I still really, really liked what this game was going for from an artistic perspective. And I think I was saying before, I think the most recent trailer before the game came out, and to my knowledge of Prince of Persia, they lean way more into like mythological creatures and cool things in this game than my understanding of what Prince of Persia was, like I think that like this game goes places like visually and in very anime ways and lots of other ways that we can talk about in the spoiler section. But like, I think they've really put a mark in the sand of like, you can do really big and bold things, and you don't have to necessarily always be an Ori or a Hollow Knight. And hey, AAAs can make awesome Metroidvanias too, not just Nintendo.
Yeah. I think really the one thing in Metroidvanias that hasn't been tackled is narrative, right? Like I think there is no Metroidvania that has a great narrative that I feel fully invested in. Like I've said, I never need one. I don't think it's ever necessary. But
they all lean towards vibes and have good narratives in their own right.
Yes. But I think like Hades proved that roguelikes can have very engaging, really good stories, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to be done here. I think the benefit of the 2.5D that Dread and this goes for is that they can pull the camera back and do third-person cinematic sequences, right? Like all the cutscenes can be in full 3D because the game itself allows for it with the character models, which I think is an advantage that like some of those end moments in Metroid Dread and some of the kind of mid-game cutscenes in Prince of Persia, they benefit from that ability. Same with the boss fights as well, right? Like there's some real cinematic flourishes that can happen in boss fights in these games because they can spin the camera around and all of a sudden we're in a different perspective to make this world feel a bit more real, right? From not having just a side-on view to it. So
no, definitely.
So I hope it does well. I hope it sells well. I hope that they commission a new game.
God, I pray it sells well.
They need to do another one. Like, just man, I think this is such a good fit. It's just such a perfect meeting of an IP and a genre, and they just nailed out the gate. Like, they just absolutely nailed it, crushed it. Like you said, people clearly love the genre and understand the genre and understand people's frustrations with the genre and maybe why people bounce off it as well. So yeah, hats off to this team. I mean, we already knew they were great. They've made amazing Rayman platformers, which are some of the best modern platformers.
Yeah,
so
Ubisoft Montpellier.
Yes.
Making more games.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that sell well, not badly.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into a bit of spoilers. I'll give you a little bit of time here so you can click away. You can go and do the dishes or go drive your car down the road and wait until the traffic light's there so you can pause it and not have to hear any
don't want to cause any car crashes.
Yeah, again, I think with spoilers with this game is mainly like gameplay stuff.
Yeah, we're just talking about bosses and abilities and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So is there anything you want to start with, Bally, from a kind of spoiler perspective?
Has there ever been a Metroidvania that has taken so long to get the double jump?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Oh my god.
I think it's interesting as well because Dread kind of did a little bit of a non-traditional thing where, because that game had a slide, and again, there's another direct comparison, is both games start with a slide, right? A ground slide, which I think is almost at this point I feel mandatory in these games. Like, just
it's a great way to get through those little half nooks, and slide into rooms.
But more importantly for me, Ballot, it means you can feel like you're moving quickly immediately. Like that's the most important thing. Is like I'm just going.
Even though you probably don't move any faster when you.
No, you don't. Well, the thing is, in Prince of Persia, you can also hold down that button and just sprint as well.
Yeah, right? That's what I was doing.
So yeah. Again, like the way that sprint, if you sprint and then attack, you do just a massive kick as opposed to this small kick from the ground. But yeah, the double jump, right? That was definitely very late game. I was saying with Metroid, the morph ball is kind of delayed a lot because you have the slide, right? But this game's just like, no, we're just gonna. No, here's the thing. I had a real moment of realization with the. What's it called where you clone yourself and then you zoop back to it? I can't remember what it's called.
I don't know. It's called a teleport.
You're like the teleport ghost, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there are these enemies in the game that are these giant slug guys with these stone faces, right? These circular stone faces with knives that like they will rush you and come after you.
Yeah.
For so long, I was like, how do I get past? I probably need to get a weapon upgrade to like a big hammer or something to smash their face in, and then I can kill them. And I can't remember what it was, but I just, out of nowhere, like, I'd had this ability for, like, a couple of hours, and then, like, a lightning bolt in my brain, I was like, oh, fuck. I can just plant my ghost, then get him to chase me, and then walk behind him, and I was like, wow, that is so cool.
Incredible.
Like, I really think that is such a cool ability in so many ways. Not that I ever used it effectively in combat, but I've seen people deploy it in combat in the most stylish way possible, where they are placing themselves above an enemy, hitting them to the ground, warping back up to hit them as they come in mid. Like, there is some real cool shit you can do with it in combat, but the way in which they make that move flexible with puzzles, it's so fun. It's so good. And yeah, I as soon as I realized that thing with the worm guys, I was like, oh, here we go. It was one of those like, let's go around the map and do all of these now, because I feel like I finally unlocked a secret here. Which is cool.
When we were alluding to the part of the game where it feels like they've replaced a boss fight with a platforming challenge, all those challenges are based around that ability to teleport. And like, obviously I did one of them slightly wrong and I just speed ran it, where you meant to like repeat and move anyway, but
the clones of yourself, essentially.
The clones of yourself. So those 4 challenges might be my favorite part of the game.
It was like, really good. I enjoyed those a lot. Yeah,
real proper innovation in 2D platforming, and you have to do this as part of the main game, and it felt so satisfying. And because it was all about working it out as well as execution. It wasn't one or the other. Yes. And I feel like I think I borked at least 2 of the 4, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't even realized until messaging you that like you needed to use the warp. Not needed to use the warp ability. What was the ability I forgot to use? It was that. Yeah. It was the warp ability.
But you didn't realize that you could place one and then your next life essentially could then use it, basically.
Right, I hadn't realized the next life could use it. I was using every single warp ability within that one life.
Within the one run, yes.
Within the one run. But I like that the game allows you to bork it like I did as well. Yes, like I think at some level someone said, okay, well maybe you can break it by doing this, and they said, well, we'll leave that in because I'm sure someone will do that, and I managed to do it. But I think that we kind of said it was they brought a lot of ideas from other Metroidvanias into this game. I'm unaware of this kind of teleporting thing being in other Metroidvanias. I could be wrong.
It definitely feels very unique.
It feels super unique, and I think the majority of the other abilities are fairly not commonplace in Metroidvanias, but I've seen versions of them before.
Yeah, 100%. Like the fabric thing you get at the end is a grapple hook, essentially. Yeah. I mean, it's a fucking great grapple hook, but like you just whip through areas once you have that. Like it just really feels like you are moving, and that like combining that with double jump and air dash and that. Yeah. It's just you have so many tools to just get places, and
I think the teleport recharges your dash and double jump as well.
Oh, interesting.
So if you put one up high and then you teleport, you can then jump. I also like that, similar to Celeste, you can jump, dash, jump, or jump, jump, dash, or dash, jump, jump. Maybe you can't do the last one, dash, jump, jump, because you have to be in the air to dash. But it feels incredibly flexible, the order, and you can tackle platforming puzzles in different ways that isn't necessarily always just one way. And similar to those enemies where you teleport, there's like some incredible platforming puzzles around spikes where you have to teleport and then dash and then double jump, and it's like, this is awesome stuff. Like, to see this, especially, this feels like Celeste levels of planning out the way you're platforming and executing on it that you just don't see with AAA games, full stop. Not even like in the Metroidvania space.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I almost felt like the ability to wall jump, then basically jump on a wall jump, dash back to the wall to reset yourself. So you're essentially Meat Boy climbing up an individual side. I was like, am I supposed? And I was like, yeah, 100% you're supposed to do that. The game is built around doing that. And I'm like, oh, this feels broken, but like in a good way, where you get to platforming sequences that you're on one side of a wall, you slide down, you dash, then double jump to the other side of it type of deal, and just recentering yourself on that wall by using the dash to kind of reset your jumps. It's really good. Like, it just has a sense of control to it, and just a sense of like, I can really be flexible with these tools they're giving me. It knocks out of the park with that stuff. Really does a number on it. I really did enjoy some of the later areas. I think the Pirate Sea area is probably the standout, where it's literally a frozen ocean that is frozen in time.
So cool.
And you run across the water, and like you just see the shards like as mid-explosion of the ship to get on top of it. I thought that was such a inspired choice. I think similar to how the kind of gauntlet platforming things are very Prince of Persia. Obviously, the Sands of Time was about rewinding time, and you have the ghost, which calls back to that, but also just places that are frozen in time, right? And just playing with time as a concept. The narrative of this game plays with time as a concept constantly, with Varum and like the kid version of Varum and all that sort of stuff, right? You are finding people who are like years are passing for them where it's only been an hour for you, you know? And I thought from a narrative perspective, even though I was like, it's a pretty simple story, I was actually pretty engaged by the story because it had those kind of time hooks into it. That was very neat. So.
My favorite part of the story was the reveal of the queen being the traitor at the end.
Yes, and that's where the name of the game, you're like, oh, the Lost Crown, right?
Right, like, and you face King Darius,
That's a great boss fight. Holy shit, a really good one. Like,
really good one.
Because they've just given you the fabric, and you're like, okay, they've given me 3 grapple points in this arena. You basically have to stay airborne for that entire fight. Like, it's really good fun. And what I realized as well in that fight is that you're supposed to use the fabric to attach to him to get closer, because oftentimes you'll be so far away and you'll be like, I can't get back in time to hit him with my attack before he does his next sequence. So it's very much using that. I get like so many layers to this, where the flying enemy suddenly becomes so much more easy, because there's a bit of like early on, maybe 4-6 hours into the game, I got really fucking annoyed with the flying enemies, because I'm just slightly missing them. I wasn't
like you. I wasn't powering up my bow much, so I really had to make contact with my swords, and it was like, God damn it, just come back.
These fucking flying enemies was pissing me off. And then as soon as you get that and you can just warp to them, I was like, oh, you guys are so fucked. You are so fucked. It was so good. And so like that fight really just instilling that idea of mechanical, like, just go to him, like use it to fling yourself in the air, but then get to him. And his parry as well, there's one that's like in the air and you have to do it mid air. That one I managed to get the timing down. It felt so satisfying to pull that off. That was so good.
I think this is one area we disagree on, and I think maybe it's partially to do with the timing at which we got abilities, but I found all the bosses, from Mounted Queen Knight Rider,
the Forest Lady,
Forest Lady, to the Snake, to the guy you fight on the pirate ship, to Menelaus, to King Darius, and the final boss. Genuinely, all of them felt like much of a muchness in terms of difficulty. And I know that you found that Fort Menelaus was much tougher than the others, but for me, they were all just super tough. I think most of them took 5 to 10 attempts, I want to say. Maybe a couple of them took more than 10. I couldn't say which ones took more than 10.
Right.
But for me, they were all really damn tough.
I think, yeah, Menelaus was real fucking wrist destroyer for me. Like, he was, I think, partially because my strategy was getting up close with people and just spending as much time aerial doing those heavy attacks. There was just not a lot of opportunities for me to do that with him, and he just kept running away. I've heard a couple of people now say this, where their strategy was to place a ghost at the corner, and then when he runs away to his corner, just walk behind him and you fuck him up. And I was like, oh my God, that is a really smart...
Yeah, I did that accidentally a couple of times, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a really smart way to get around him. But like it was probably my favorite fight in the game at the end. I think this is what happens sometimes, is the boss you struggle on the most tends to be the one that's most memorable and the one you like the most.
I love the background scenery, like the mountains, and you're high up.
Yes.
Like, it's incredible, that area.
Yeah, but like, because I struggled through it, because I just went through, like, I had to learn every single one of his moves. I had to know when to parry his arrows back at him. I had to know what to dodge, when to do it. Like, it felt like I really learned that fight, and by the time I finished, I was like, that was super satisfying. To get in there, get destroyed, and then eventually get my way to being like, I beat you. I did on my own terms.
Parrying in the later phases, you're parrying twice, sometimes 3 times those arrows back to him.
Yes.
And then the window to do damage to him is then so small.
It's minute.
You're like, God damn. Like,
right.
It's hard.
Definitely is.
I felt that for the majority of the bosses, there was no boss out of those hard bosses I described where I was like, I have completely nailed this. I have now worked out a strategy to avoid every single attack and parry every attack necessary. There was always one boss. Every boss had at least one attack that I was like, God, you got me again. And because of my health and where I was allowed to be hit by that one move as long as I executed well on the other moves. But I think it was a really good balance of like, these are quite hard to work out. Like, King Darius had one move that did so much damage in the true anime Dragon Ball style.
Right.
Where,
because they have their special, not unblockable, but they have moves that are parryable, that if you miss the parry, they will just... I think the reason Menelaus was also fucking me up is because when I was fighting him early on, if you attack him when he's going into Super Saiyan, he does that just reversal punch on you, and it takes like 4 of your fucking hearts away. Like, it does so much damage. Those cinematic moments do so much damage.
But they have like almost area of effect moves that attack the screen, and if you get hit by any point on the screen by that move, it then becomes a cutscene where you take essentially
right. That's the laser one that he does, right?
Are you talking about King Darius?
King Darius, yeah.
Yes, no, exactly. And I think I managed to avoid that move like once.
Wow,
like,
wow. Okay.
Every other time, there's always just like, oh, my foot got caught by the damn thing, and then the cutscene continues. And I thought all that stuff was incredibly impressive, and like, just it felt like the fights had stakes, and like I said earlier, like there's that Mega Man style of it's just about getting more damage on them faster than they can get damage on you, and just kind of if you can keep that pace of damage up, you're going to win most of the time. We
haven't really talked about Athra, but talking of those boss abilities, like you often get the boss cinematic as your Athra move after you beat them. So like Menelaus's big punch move you get after you beat him. Orod's, you get Orod's big storm one. Was there Athra stuff that you liked, didn't like, ones you used? Did you forget about it often in boss fights? How was your use of that as a kind of ability?
I used it very defensively and strategically and turtily, like I
Classic,
would. So my early game, I liked the one that healed you, even though you had to stand in the spot, which was became futile by the end. But I liked
because you have to keep moving by the end of the game, so it's much more difficult.
I liked the very first one you get. The first it uses one shot.
Yeah, the level 1 from the beginning. I kept that the whole game.
Me too. And then I used the level 3 one, which was basically supercharged Sargon. It basically makes him Super Saiyan, and he speeds up and does more damage. But on top of that, his health bar goes back to full. So it's like it's almost like a full potion, Oh,
I didn't realize that.
I was using that in the later game boss fights, especially where it's like, right, you got me down, and boom. And then, like I was saying about the bug earlier in the segment, I couldn't do the side quest that would have got me another potion, so I did the final boss with 4 potions, not 5. So
I actually almost bugged that moon guy as well, but it was in a different way, where I did his second thing and then he didn't give me anything on the screen, and I tried to walk out the screen, but the screen stayed. I couldn't like leave the room because the camera didn't pan it over. And so I opened the menu, and I went to the menu, and I just looked at it, and I found the thing he gave me, and then I pressed B, and all of a sudden it popped up, and it was like, now you have this item. I was like, oh wow! I somehow managed to get myself out of the glitch of that happening, which was lucky. But yeah, if you do all the Moonweaver, whatever he's called, things, you get an extra potion. So I had 5 potions by the end, and I had maxed out my efficiency on them, so I was pretty much maxing myself every time.
Did you go for 100% of the map in the end?
No, I didn't quite do it. There's definitely some stuff in there that I might want to go back for, but I think because a lot of the end game collectibles are just lore pieces and stuff like that, I was like, and
there's nothing saying whether it's been read or found or anything, right?
Right. It's much. I think those things are much harder to find. Yeah. So like for the end of the game, it doesn't do a good job of like mapping it out. Yeah, I think there's a thing that Dread does much better, which is like the pulse ability you have to scan areas is so good for cleaning up 100%. And also everything you get in Dread feels more meaningful with missiles, power bombs, and health. Like those they're all actively good things for your character to get, versus in this game the things that I did go after were the sand jars, which I had every single one apart from 2. So I looked those up on like an IGN wiki map or whatever. You could figure out like, because it tells,
and they put together the not tapestry, the thing,
the entire
mosaic thing.
The mosaic, so I looked up where the last 2 of those were, so I finished the mosaic off basically.
Nice.
But yeah, that was the main thing I wanted to do, was finish that mosaic to do that side quest. But I didn't feel like going after the rest. That it's nice in that every section of a map, it tells you how many out of how many you have of a certain thing, so it does narrow the window a little bit of like what you're looking for. But I wish there was just like for as much accessibility as this game has, I wish there was a thing that was like, just show me on my map where everything I'm missing is, and I just want the satisfaction of going and getting it.
Exactly.
That would have been ideal, I think, but alas, they don't do that. So
I know I'm more turtley than you.
Yes.
I'm really surprised you didn't utilize the amulet that improves your counter.
Yeah, I did do that for a little bit. So there's the I don't know which one you ended up using. Are you talking about the time bubble one?
Yeah, so the time bubble, and the bubble gets bigger the more you upgrade it and longer.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I did like that I used it for a little bit, like maybe for 20 minutes or so.
It was crucial to me the entire game, including boss fights. It's so good for slowing down bosses and just getting more damage on them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know what it was, but I felt like when I used it on regular enemies, I was like, I don't actually get that much of a window to hit them, really. I could just hit them regularly.
On the lowest upgrade, I agree.
Yeah, so I didn't really, because I then bounced and didn't upgrade it, I just never went back to it. But I think I just felt, when it comes to stuff like this, I feel like the bare essentials, the bare bones is always going to be the thing that you can optimize to just make things easier for yourself. And so as soon as I found an amulet that was like, increases defense, you take less damage from people, I was like, well, I'm just going to max that out, because that's just across the board.
I did that one as well, though.
Sure, yeah.
So but then I was like, amulets were increased defense, increased counter window,
right,
increase aerial damage.
Okay.
And I never got the one that increases standard damage.
So I had aerial damage, standard damage, maxed out +4 swords. So that's why I was probably shredding through the last boss.
And I had +3 swords, not +4.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I was probably shredding through the last boss, and also was taking like no damage from him. So I think that's partially why I found the last boss like just kind of a bit of a pushover. But yeah, I think that...
Yeah, it took me a few times.
Yeah, there's some moves... There's some moves in his arsenal that I never really had to learn, because I'm like, I can just tank this and not have to learn it, which I think is a little bit of a shame, because I think part of the joy of the bosses in this game is learning them properly and learning the patterns.
I will say, the Metroid Dread final boss I found tougher than any of these bosses.
Oh, way tougher, yes. Definitely.
But by the time maybe this is partly because it took me so long to beat that boss, but by the time I beat the Metroid Dread final boss, I'm not saying I executed on this every time, but I could do that entire fight without taking a single bit of damage, because I knew the moves so well.
Correct.
I would argue that there probably wasn't a single boss out of these hard bosses where I'm confident I could have ever executed that in this game. Where I just feel like some of the moves were so difficult to either counter or dodge, or a combination of the two.
Yeah, and I think that's why that boss, like, I think that is one of my favorite boss fights of all time, because it requires you to absolutely drill it so hard that you can do it in your sleep, right?
Yes.
You drill every moment of that fight. And yeah, you're right. None of these, the closest I got was Menelaus, but even that, I think it just doesn't compare in the same way. But yeah, there's definitely like ways around and doing a bunch of damage. Like, so the level 3 Athra that I used was the one you get from Orod, the giant storm, which basically, if you use it on regular enemies, it lifts everyone into the air and then just murders them all, basically. So for some of those tougher challenge rooms where they lock you in and you're like the ghost guys who disappear and freeze you, those guys were really annoying. So I used it on them a couple times. But then, like, you know, the last bosses, I was like, all right, let's just go nuclear, and it does like a good 30 to 40% of their health.
It does 30 to 40% of their health?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It did a lot of fucking
damage. And that's a
damage.
level 3?
It was level 3,
okay,
yeah.
well, yeah.
Took time to pop, but yeah, again, you used the one that you get a bit more health back. I went fully offensive.
Yeah, I went turtle to the max. But I did need that survivability by the end of the game for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Man.
So yeah, I mean, this game fucking rips. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Is there anything else that stands out to you, spoiler wise, that you want us to chat about, or?
I think we have covered everything I have in my mind about this game. It is sublime. Honestly, everyone needs to play it. Yeah.
If we are at, imagine yourself right now, Bali, it's the 12th of December 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this landing? How has it been fucked by coming out in January by the end of this year?
For us personally, or in the GOTY discussions elsewhere?
I think just for us personally. How are you going to remind yourself that you like this game this much at the end of the year, basically?
I find my memory for liking and not liking games is pretty good. I don't think I'm that overly critical. I don't think I skew against games that came out early in the year necessarily. Where I think this will come by the end of the year, I'd be really surprised if it was outside my top 3.
Wow, damn, that's big.
But that depends. We might get a 3D Mario this year. What other games am I excited about? We're playing Rebirth soon. That might be very high as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe something like Hellblade 2 takes my fancy. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what will be my top 5 for sure. But like, I think there's Silk Song might come out. Like, I think that's a really great comparison. We've also got Tales of Kinzera Zao, which is definitely this. Like, I feel like those other 2 games, Tales of Kinzera Zao is a bit different because that's first.
It's a first-time game, small studio.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if that does really well. But this game versus Silk Song, I think is. I hope Silk Song can make it out this year so we can have that discussion. I think that'd be such a fun discussion, not just for us to have, but like loads of other podcasts and other commentators. So like, I'd be fascinated what to make of Silk Song versus this game.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you think it's coming up top 3? Top 4? There's a lot of MBZ anime JRPG stuff.
There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I think it's definitely top 5 for me, guaranteed. But yes, I don't know how I'm going to feel about Final Fantasy. I don't know how by the end of Infinite Wealth I'm going to feel about that. So yeah, I feel like it's almost guaranteed top 5. But I hope that is the case. I hope it sticks there because it's number 1 right now. There's nothing else challenging it. So
definitely.
We'll see. Great. Well, we are going to take a break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after that to tackle some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's that time again. It's time for emails. We always need more emails. We always put out the call. If you would like to send an email to This Nintendo Life, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We also have a channel. It's in our Discord server. We have a community of over 150 people over there. Would highly recommend checking out that community. We have a channel there called Emails. You can also post them in there. Our first email is actually from Sully, who was on Discord and said, "Hello gentlemen, I just beat a game called Downwell after 15 hours worth of attempts. While the credits were rolling, I started hooting and running laps around the house. What is the most you both have ever popped off from completing a challenge in video games? Thank you so much." Is popping off quite a British phrase? It's all popped off.
I feel like popping off is it British? I feel like I've heard other people use it.
Popping off, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's definitely something that has happened a lot in the past, depending on how old we were and what was happening. I mean, but are you going to talk about the Smash Brothers thing? Because that's the one that's always in my brain every single time.
So yeah, the most famous one is unlocking Luigi in Smash Brothers Melee,
which is, by the way, not a feat at all. It is not. It's not something difficult to do.
But I think the context of this needs to be, at the time, we weren't very good at video games.
No, of course.
We had been beaten by challengers approaching before.
Right.
There's also the fact that when a challenger approaches in Melee, it's like a roguelike. Like, if you fail there, you have to start again until the challenger reapproaches. You don't just go straight into a second attempt. So,
well, it depends, because like if you leave your GameCube on for 20 hours overnight, like I did for Mewtwo, if you lose, you just have to play another match and then Mewtwo comes back. So it does depend on the specific challenger and what their conditions are.
But even playing one more match before getting an attempt, the stakes feel higher. So my reaction to getting Luigi, which I'll get to in a second, was based on the fact that, like, I feel like back then stakes were never high when we were playing video games. At least for me, a lot of the games I played, Mario Kart, Burnout, stakes are not high, you know, like, so, and then you watching me on top of that, are you kidding me? Like, that stakes are even higher. Like,
pressure,
I'm here as my character. I think I was Mario, I can't remember.
Of course, you always played Mario, Vanilla Boy.
Captain Vanilla. And facing Luigi, unlocking him, and then so I in that house at the time, you could like run around in a circle between rooms, and the rooms would like link up a bit, and I just went berserk and just like ran around celebrating that I'd unlocked Luigi, which, looking back, you're right, it was a pretty easy thing to do.
Because I think it was basically adventure mode. You had to get like the number 2 in the clock at like the second mark, right? So you had to like cross the line when the seconds on the clock were, it was either 2 or was another number, right? And that would be the trigger for you to then fight Luigi and then unlock him. So it did kind of come down to playing adventure mode, at least up until that point, in order to trigger him. So it was a lot to go through in order for that to happen. But yeah, like, just this email, Sally saying hooting and running laps around the house, the image in my mind, just instantly like lightning, is just Bally beating Luigi, unlocking him, and just screaming and running around the house.
So we were
literally.
Like 11 when Melee came out.
Yeah, I'd probably say. 10, so, 11. Yeah.
Hyped up 11-year-old. You know, when MBZ was around the house, it was all the sugary drinks came out. We're hyped up on sugar. Like, it was a hype time.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's a big pop off. So a recent one for me that I wouldn't say was a pop off, because I literally physically couldn't pop off because I was in a public space, was So Celeste's a difficult game. Celeste is definitely a challenging game. Celeste is more challenging when you do the B-sides. Those are very hard. Celeste is astronomically challenging when you do the C-sides. And if you've never done a C-side in Celeste, it is essentially a screen that you could, if you did it correctly, finish it in about 30 to 40 seconds, right? If you execute on this screen, you can do this platforming challenge in under a minute. And there is a screen.
Are they all single screen, the C-sides?
No, they're not I wouldn't say they're single screen. Like, the single screen is in you can scroll all the way across, basically, and it keeps going, basically.
Segment, yeah.
But it's one segment, essentially. The chapter 5 Seaside. So at that time I was doing some work experience stuff, looking for another job. I was doing work experience, and it involved me in the morning on a bus, taking a 1-hour bus from Edinburgh all the way out to further out, basically. And that bus, every morning, I was playing Celeste at the time, and so every morning I would get on that bus and I would go and play Celeste, and I was playing through the seaside. So I was slowly playing through the seasides. I spent 3 days in a row on the bus there and the bus back. That is 6 hours on a screen that could have taken me 30 seconds if I did it correctly. That, I think, is the most difficult thing I have ever done in a video game. It's 6 hours on this one execution. It was agony. Just, my fingers were raw. I was using the D-pad on the Switch, which is not a real D-pad. Like, there is so much that goes into just the slight movement, and the, like, there's spikes everywhere, and it is just like a little bit of a chip of like doing that kind of jump off the wall, like the wall jump, but on like a 1 pixel type of thing. And I eventually did it, and I was still on the bus when I did it, and I remember like internally screaming, but I was in a public space on the bus, and so I couldn't really emote, but I just...
Were you on the way into the work experience or on the way home?
I can't actually remember if it was morning or evening. I would imagine it would be morning, because I felt like my better runs were in the morning when I was more alert and more like, okay, I'm like fresh for the day, basically, versus afterwards where I was like a little bit more drained, right? So I imagine it was like morning of the 3rd day or whatever, and like I do it. I remember hitting the button to record it. I was actually trying to look on Twitter to see if I could find. I can't find it at the moment, but that video is out there on my Twitter somewhere of me and I like watching it. You're like, oh, that didn't seem too bad, but like doing that fucking thing is like, it was a real trial. And yeah, I eventually did get broken by Celeste. I never finished the DLC because the DLC eventually got to a point where it asks you to do there's a kind of technique that is, unless you're a speedrunner or like you can figure out how to do that speedrunner tech, you're not going to get through the rest of it. And I couldn't even do the tutorial for the speedrun tech, so I was like, well, I'm just never going to do this, basically. So I did bail eventually on the farewell DLC for Celeste, but I did every single thing in that game that wasn't that kind of
all
lost
the seasides.
Every seaside, yeah.
Nice.
But it was weirdly with the chapter 5 one, which was the one that got me, because I did chapter 6 and I did chapter 7. I was like, those were not as hard as chapter 5. I went through the fucking fire doing chapter 5. So yeah, that. Nice. But again, like Celeste, I think one of the all-time great games, and the thing that elevates it for me is those B and C sides, because as much as I love the main game and think that is exceptionally good, and from a narrative perspective as well, the challenge and the kind of design that they throw at you in those additional things is what elevates it to like special status for me personally. Yeah, it's tremendous.
I've got a couple. I must admit that my overwhelming reaction to both these things was more melting into a puddle and just being exhausted and drained, and that
like glad to be done with it, basically.
Glad to be done with it. And I think that when the reaction is predominantly popping off and jumping around, it's probably not actually that tough, because you still have the energy to jump around.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
One of the most draining experiences I had was beating Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It was a brutal, brutal lesson in ballet. This is not an action game. It's not about doing the thing better. It's about going away, getting stronger, and coming back and doing the thing. But for some reason, I treated it like an action game. I just have to do this one fight better.
Right.
And I somehow did the final boss better, but it took me like 8 to 11 hours.
That's
just to
unbelievable.
Beat the final
Holy shit.
boss
oh my god.
Of an already like 80, 90 hour game. And it was a brutal lesson in... I'm now permanently scarred to ever try and mainline anything JRPG related again.
Yes.
There's the second you can't do one of two things: either lower difficulty, or what was I going to say?
Beat it through just skill, right?
Or beat it through skill.
Yeah.
It's made me reluctant to ever like I must go and do a side thing, even if this side thing is pointless, because ultimately I need to gain more XP to level up to, or I need to go and get this item, because it is not worth it ever to just bang your head up against a brick wall on a JRPG in the same way you would with, say, an action game like we talked about Metroid Dread in the first.
I wonder if, like, had, say, for example, had Octopath 2 been your first ever JRPG and you had just fought that final boss 25 times, not going away and leveling up, like, I wonder how that would have affected your experience, because I think that is, like, it's a lesson to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it was a brutal lesson at the time, but I think it has made me enjoy JRPGs going forward 10 times more, especially with those final bosses. And Octopath Traveler 2 is a great example where I attempted the final boss, failed, thought I'm going to go away, level up some more, come back, and I think I said to myself, I'm going to attempt this 5 to 10 times. If it's beyond that, this is silly. I need to go away and do other stuff and then come back. Like, I'm a lot more rational. I'm a lot more prepared to fail. I'm a lot more balanced as a human being.
Sure.
And I just went in very naive, hadn't played many JRPGs, into Xenoblade 1. The final boss really kicked my ass, and it was just a very bad way to end a game that I otherwise really enjoyed. So I think that was a really stupid one. I was just a puddle after beating that, and it was just stupid. The other one was essentially me presenting myself as a gamer to Caroline.
Okay, all right.
So there's a game called VVV that we've talked about a lot on the show. And back when we were living in Brussels, and we'd lived together for not that long, and I was playing a bunch of indie games. Like, a bunch of indie games in 2017 came to Switch, including VVV that I had never played. And you're like, Bal, you got to play this game. We talked about it. You've talked about it previously loads on the show, and I was like, I'm going to play this game. And then we talked about the level Veni Vidi Vici, and it's one of the hardest things I've probably done in games. I don't think it's maybe the top, but it's up there. It's a really hard one. It's a very tough little platforming thing to do. And Caroline, watching me do that, I think she was very freaked out by the state of being I reached, where I was tense and sweating. I get very sweaty and tense with tough boss fights and tough things in games, and it's after I beat the thing that I realized, God, I'm really hot right now. This isn't healthy, and I don't like getting
the funny ones for me is also when you were playing Kana. I think Caroline also recorded you when you were doing that, and then you sent me the videos of you fighting bosses, and it's very funny.
Kana Bridge of Spirits is a really tough game, but very good game. But yeah, Veni Vidi Vici, I'd say it was in and around that ballpark of tough Kana bosses for sure. And yeah, this was the first time Caroline had seen me get this sweaty and tense with a video game. I think it freaked her out a bit.
Oh god.
But then she's seen me like that most of the time since then. So yeah, but that like I said, when I beat that, I was more of a puddle, but it was still kind of one of those tough things that I overcame.
Yeah, I definitely had that on the list as well. It's one of those memorable tough challenges in games. I don't know. I enjoyed the process of doing it, just again because I like platforming, so I think it was enjoyable. My biggest puddle is probably Mario Wonder's final challenge. I wouldn't say it's, to some degree it is, and some degree it isn't. I was more thankful to the fucking gods. When I got through that invisible thing at the end and finally got to the end, I was like, if I don't hit the top of this fucking flagpole, I'm going to take this cartridge out my Switch, snap it in half, and throw it in the bin. I was so fucking done with that thing.
Prevented Mario Wonder plummeting off the bottom of your Game of the Year list.
Yeah, maybe to some extent. God, Jesus Christ. I otherwise really enjoyed that final challenge because there's lots of segments of it that I think are really enjoyable and good and challenging, but there are two in particular. One where you're just constantly bouncing and it's just a fucking nightmare with timing with fire beams and you're just bouncing, and then the second is at the very final point you're invisible and you have to jump over these things, not knowing where you are, hitting things that are moving mid-air to bounce on to get to the other side. It is agonizing, and I had such a hard time with it. And yeah, if I hadn't hit the top of that fucking flagpole, I don't know what I would have done. I was so And the thing is, I've done this before where I never finished the last challenge in 3D Land. I never finished the last thing in Galaxy 2, and I never finished the last 3D World thing either. A lot of which you did. You did 3D Land and 3D World.
I did all of them bar Galaxy 2.
Yeah. But Mario Wonder, I was like, I've done everything. I cannot like physically let this go. And so the fact that I did hit the top of the flagpole, I was like, just the most relieved I think I've ever been.
Just to clarify, when you're hitting the top of the flagpole, you're invisible in that moment.
Yep.
So it really feels like a leap of faith.
It is 100%. Like,
oh my God.
It is so like, did I do it or did I not do it? And I did. I used the spin jump at the end to be like, I need as much fucking height as I can possibly get.
You've overshot it by like 8 Mario lengths.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That's enough to just make you feel like you've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw a lot of videos of people not hitting it, and I was like, I could not go through that again. Like, oh my God. To be fair, I don't think it would have been quite as bad, because once you've done it so many times, your muscle memory is there, and you're like, blitz through it probably. But yeah, it was. I think I got to that challenge at about 10 hours in the game, or maybe 12 hours in the game, and I finished it, and I think I was like 18 or 20 or something. Yeah. Like, more than a third of my experience with the game was that one level. How hard that level is.
You also did the one in Mario Odyssey, which is quite an easy one, actually.
Yeah, that one is the Odyssey one is the easiest, I think, of all of them. Yeah, definitely a step down overall. And then the last one for me is Guitar Hero 3, the first time that I beat Through the Fire and the Flames on hard. Which I don't actually remember.
It became a party trick.
It did, yeah. I don't actually remember the first time I did it, but I do remember the process of going through it. I think you and Ali T probably watched me a bunch get to that point. You know that point at the end where the solo starts to get crazy? And it's like...
Yeah, all the melody just loses. It loses all its melody and just becomes this ridiculous machine. Yeah,
it's like... And there's... If you get to that bit, then you know that you've made it through. And it's just getting through that gauntlet of fucking hammer-ons and pull-offs of just like... I would just die on that section over and over, but like I just kept doing it. I can't remember how many fucking times I played that song.
Did you go back and play the slow-mo versions to get better at it, or did you just
I think I did. I think I did do, just to see like, where am I going wrong here? What is it, like, just a general area of where I should be pressing to get through this section. And eventually I did it. And I think like the first time you do it, it's like you're at the end and you're like, oh my God, don't miss these last fucking notes, basically, right? I just remember my heart just beating out of my chest, being like, and then you get it and you finish, it's like, holy shit. And then obviously after that, I do it like 25 more times, right? Like once you've done it once, that's it. You've overcome it and then you know how to do it.
If you had the guitar right now, could you do it?
I think I could get close. I think I would probably need...
a lot of muscle memory, I guess.
I probably would need like 5 to 10 attempts to do it, but I think I could do it again.
That's not many. That's
good.
Yeah.
So I think I could do it, but man, that was a absolute trial to do that. And it's so funny because like when I first started playing Guitar Hero, I was like terrible at it. Like I could only do three buttons at a time.
You were impressed by my medium Knights of Sidonia.
Yeah, totally. And like I was like, but I thought it was so cool. And I just wanted to learn it. And so I think it was literally like one December where I got it for Christmas, and then I played it all month. And then like I went to your house, and I was like, now look what I can do. And it was a nice ramp up. So that was definitely a, oh my God, I can't believe I fucking did it type of moment for me, for sure.
In terms of like popping off as well, I think there's been unlimited close matches in Super Smash Brothers, both locally and online, that we've both just lost our minds with. Like, I came so close. Or when one of us makes an insane comeback. Those are always like the ones, but that's always a great time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one which is more exhaustion, again feeding into your theme of exhaustion, is when you finished my Mario Maker level that we did that YouTube video on. I think you getting to the end was just like, oh, can I go home now? You know, you're just like so done with playing Mario Maker.
That was a very good level of difficulty. If I was a complete puddle after that, then I don't think I should have been. I think that was a very healthy level of difficulty.
Yeah, for sure.
Not crazy.
But yeah, some fun stuff there. I still, and going back to Sully's email, I've yet to finish Downwell. I played a lot of Downwell. I played like at least 5-6 hours. But yeah, it's a very difficult game, and definitely back in the era when I was just I played roguelikes and just didn't finish any of them. So yes, good achievement for sure. One worthy.
Now roguelikes have narratives that can be finished and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
Well, thanks very much, Sully. Our next email is from Fernando L, who says, "Hi guys, just wanted to say I really appreciate the show. It's definitely a treat when I see a new episode in my queue. I have a question for you guys. How do you feel about performance and quality modes on Nintendo platforms? I don't have an Xbox or PlayStation, but I think I would hate the experience of having to decide. The options are clearly compromised in different ways, and I imagine I would always feel that I picked the wrong mode when playing. It feels very PC-ish to me. I love the pure Nintendo experience of not having to ponder about that stuff. I also feel that not having to offer multiple modes must simplify the development process. In the case of the Switch, devs already have to consider docked versus handheld scenarios, and I think it would make things even harder if they were also expected to offer performance quality modes for each of those scenarios. And I believe it's way more valuable to have one well-optimized balanced mode than multiple modes with varying degrees of quality. My fear is that users' expectations of multiple modes could influence Nintendo's Switch successor. Any thoughts? Cheers, Fernando."
Yeah, this is not something I've really thought about, but is definitely a possibility for the future, at least from a kind of third-party games perspective, because really, people can decide if they want to put these modes into games. It's not a thing that's mandated by Xbox or PlayStation to say, you have to have an option for players, but just a lot of games now offer it because there is a variance in terms of there's enough headroom, I guess, for the consoles to have performance modes and run at higher frame rates. I feel like it's not a very Nintendo thing to do, so I don't think Nintendo ever would do it in their own games, but I feel like there's a possibility that other developers look at it and think, okay, maybe we can do this. I think some of it plays into whether this thing has the DLSS style stuff, because that is a factor in terms of, so for example, playing Infinite Wealth right now, I'm jumping between my PC and my Steam Deck, and on my Steam Deck I tend to lock it to 30 frames, so I'm basically playing in a quality mode where the visuals look much nicer and crisper on Steam Deck, but it's at a lower frame rate, and that's because the frame rate's a little bit bouncy on there, and I would rather actually have it at a higher quality handheld visually, so it's not as muddy on the small screen versus being a higher frame rate in that way. So it's interesting because the Switch's power, or Switch 2's power, will it have enough headroom to do stuff like that? Because the Steam Deck right now, I mean, it can run stuff at 60 pretty often, and most games it does, but when brand new big games come out, like you can't really run Elden Ring at 60 frames on the Steam Deck. You kind of it's better to cap it at 30 and enjoy it at a more stable frame rate there versus doing anything else. So yeah, like on my PC, I've got 120 frames, full visual quality, everything for Like a Dragon, and then on Steam Deck it's more pared back, but it still looks really nice, but it's just 30 frames instead. So yeah, it's interesting because that is kind of it's a PC docked versus handheld scenario, and I just don't know that Nintendo will do that all themselves, or at least even have the headroom in performance to make that possible.
Yeah. Like a game like Mario Odyssey runs 60 docked and 10 handheld, right? It's just the resolution that changes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like, I think I would be confident in saying I think obviously the Nintendo games on the next Switch will probably be at much higher frame rates, probably 60 FPS, probably even on like larger, more open world stuff. We'll see. But there might be that differential again where third party stuff is clearly 30 or lower, but Nintendo managed to juice, the extra processing power or whatever this new system has. And I think Nintendo would probably get by with that and be satisfied with that as an outcome, because for them it's all about keeping the thing cheap, and there's obviously the story about it's going to have an LCD screen, not an OLED, and like for them it's all about selling a lot of systems, selling a lot of Nintendo software, and I think performance is an afterthought. In the grand scheme of things, it's obviously important that this system is much more powerful than the Switch. They need to hang in there in terms of third party and even indie interests. As the indie space becomes a lot more AAA. The indie space becomes a lot more higher graphical fidelity, you might argue.
Right.
I think that it's in Nintendo's interest that the next Switch can really juice those frames and you can get a lot out of it. And I think it'll probably not please everyone, but that's what Nintendo always do when it comes to power. But they'll be able to get plenty out of it themselves.
Yeah, like, I don't... Nintendo want a catered experience in every sense of the word, right? They don't want you to change the controls significantly. Like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you can only swap the jump button between one of two options. They don't let you fully rebind stuff. Like, there is a Nintendo vision to the way that games are presented, to where I never think they will ever say, do you want to have frame rate or do you want to have... Because Nintendo, they almost want to make people forget that these are even technically driven things.
Exactly.
They want you to be like, this is a magic thing that runs on this magic box, right? And the more that they talk about frame rates and resolution and options, the less that they present you with a full vision product, right? And so yeah, I feel like they might almost discourage people from doing it, but I don't think they have that much control about what third-party companies can do. So I don't know. I don't feel like a lot of users are going to expect that, though, because I imagine a lot of people picking up Switch are either people like us who know what's going on, or they're people who have previously owned a Switch, and so they don't even have the idea of performance or quality in their mind in the first place. So it's not something they really think about. And if you are someone who enjoys Nintendo's games, it's just not really an important factor, because none of their games ever require that power to really do much else with it, right?
I think arguably performance and quality, as long as the performance is smooth, I don't think it really impacts anything that much.
As long as it's consistent, yeah.
Yeah, as long as it's consistent. I think predominantly it's a luxury. And it's hard to sometimes go back, but even when you play 30 frames per second that's smooth, it feels fine after 5 seconds. It honestly does. And I think that for the vast majority of people, they don't know much about resolution. They don't know much about frames per second. And they have fallen into buying an Xbox Series X, a PS5, that just so happens to work well on 60 FPS on their 4K TV. It's not because they bought a 4K TV because they needed it for the PS5. It's just that's the trend and where TVs are going. And Bob's your uncle, the PS5 also runs at 4K. It's more accident than decided, if that makes sense, for the vast majority of people.
A stat I would love to know, because I believe that Spider-Man defaults to quality out the box and you have to switch to performance to make it, if you want to do that. I would love to know the stats. What percentage of people even know to do that, even go and change it from quality? Because my imagining is like 60+% of people just leave it on quality mode because they don't even know it's an option.
Yeah.
And they just play the game at 30 FPS and they don't know any better and they just leave it like that the whole time. I legit think that's a possibility.
But that could be a false stat to suggest that people care about quality more than performance, when if you flipped it and the game started on performance over quality, it'd be the same.
It would be the
number,
same stat.
right?
It would just be because people just don't have the literacy for it.
Yeah,
totally. Exactly. So yeah, it's and the developer can choose what they open the game with. They can choose what they want to present to the player. So yeah, I feel like it is a weird thing, and I think that a lot of people have been annoyed about it entering the console space because it is like. The email says is very PC-esque, and I think there is definitely a danger there for people on console, because I know a lot of people like console because there is no fiddling with stuff. It gives you one option and that's what you do, and you just play it, and there's never any worrying about it. And there is a freedom to that. There is something very freeing about it, because when I play stuff on Switch, I'm like, oh, there's a bit of frame drops there. It's fine. I can't do anything to change it. That's just how the game is, right? If I'm playing that on PC and I see a frame drop,
I must fix it.
I instantly open the menu and I'm like, right, what do I reduce? Okay, SSAO. Am I going to reduce texture rendering? Am I going to get motion? Like, there's like 50 options in this menu. And I do find myself, when I play PC games, the first hour of me playing a PC game, it's about 30 minutes of me playing the game. The first hour is interspersing me opening the menu, walking a little bit, not really being engaged or immersed in the world, because I'm just trying to see, I'm looking at my frame rate counter. Is it dropping now? Is it not? Okay, let's go back and change it again. Like, and like, I kind of hate that. I kind of do, even though I want to get the best possible experience. That's why I'm in there tweaking settings. I just kind of hate that I have to do that, because it takes away so much of the impact of starting a new game, of like, you know, it's kind of a blessing that I've just bought Jedi Survivor on PS5, because I remember playing Fallen Order on PC, and the first part of that game is like, I don't remember a lot of it, because it was opening the menu every 5 minutes to change settings. Like, you get in your head about it. And because you can have a frame rate counter on PC and you have so many options to tweak, you're just trying to optimize it for your rig to make it work the best possible. And I think it is a curse that we shouldn't be bringing to console people, because I think it's going to make more people more annoyed. So it's tricky.
My prediction for the next Nintendo console, Switch 2, would be that Nintendo games will not have the option. Third-party games probably will have the option. I think that predominantly swapping between handheld and docked will only be a change in resolution, not performance. I think that's what I would predict. Would you agree?
Yeah. I don't even know if there will be third parties who do this stuff. Because I think the real struggle for third parties is, can we get it to run in the first place, you know?
Right. There's only one mode that we can get it to run on. Right. That's the mode. We're not there's not the power to do an extra boost or whatever. Yeah,
and unless you are building a game specifically for the platform, you know. Prince of Persia, Astral Chain, those are two of the best examples of third-party Switch games. Even Bayonetta, Cereza and the Lost Demon, it runs at 30. Off the tongue, doesn't it? It runs at 30, but it is consistent and solid, and it looks good. It looks really nice. And it's just made visually to fit the platform, and that's what they've built it around. They've built it around being very nice looking, running at a certain frame rate that fits and is going to be consistent. I think that's the best approach for anyone making games for whatever the success it ends up being. And, you know, if you're making something that is kind of lower tier visually, then it's easier for you to say, oh, we can give them the option. Or if there's more headroom, then it's easier to give the option. But again, for a Nintendo audience, do you really want to? Because ultimately these performance quality modes are for sickos who want the best visual fidelity. And that really is what Xbox and PlayStation are always fighting over, despite, you know, neither of them being able to hit the highs of what PC does. At least in the console space, that's what they care about. So I just don't think anyone has ever, who have owned a Nintendo system, at least since the GameCube, has been like, oh, I wish this had better, highest cutting edge graphics, basically.
That's why the vague rumors of like a Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom package for Switch 2 feels weird, because the implication is they don't really change much about anything of those games. They just up-res them, better frame rates, put it in a package, go. That just does not feel like a Nintendo thing to do.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
So I mean, it's only a rumor, but I'd be surprised if a package like that came out in or around Switch 2 launch. It just feels antithetical to what Nintendo's about.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I don't think we'll have to worry about it too much.
And all will be revealed very soon. Very soon.
Yeah. What do you know, Bally? What are your secrets? I'm interested. Again, as the console, we'll just be talking about it this whole year. I'm waiting for RFN to bring back the alarm. Except we don't have a code name anymore, so I don't know.
Oh right, yeah.
What it is, but
are we even going to get a code name?
I don't think we will.
Jump in.
Yeah, it's just going to be...
When are we going to get that trailer dropped?
It's going to be like
going to a park bench and
random Tuesday, and they're just going to put it on Twitter, and they'll be like, "It's the console." And we're like, "Oh, cool, thanks."
What if instead of going to a park bench to chill with some Zelda, they go onto a bus to stress over some Celeste? Like that's
exactly.
There we go.
Take my real life experience, make it marketing. That's always what I say.
Yeah. Very good question, Fernando. Thanks very much for that one. And that's all the emails we've got this time.
Yes.
If you would like to send an email, like I said, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife email.com. And yes, like I also said, there's a channel on our Discord server called Emails. You can also post them in there.
Absolutely. So that is going to do us for today's episode. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. You can find us all over the shop. We're all over the place. The internet, you might say. And you can follow us on Twitter. I'm at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. And I'm also on Blue Sky.
Yeah. You can find the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast for updates and things. And, of course, if you would like to get some more of this show, you can support us in another way by going to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can get bonus episodes and other fun stuff. And you can hear me talking about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, I'm sure, when we do our February show. But Bally would like to thank some patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, Turtle, and, of course, Ali T.
Of course, Ali
also,
T.
Thank you to a brand new patron, Jamie H. Thank you for your support, and thank you to all of our other patrons. We're really on a roll on the Patreon front, so I really appreciate the support, and we want to keep producing more stuff, more things to listen to.
Absolutely. So Ali, just an update to the Ali T saga.
Update.
He contacted us and he said,
I'm watching you.
He said, I'm listening. He was like, oh, fuck it, I've got a sniper aimed at your back, all right? He corrected us, just for a correction segment. It's apparently his boss and his son, not just a colleague who listens to us. So shout out to Ali T's boss and Ali T's boss's son.
Ali T's boss, hi there.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Ask Ali T to take the sniper of us. Thank you.
Yeah, please. Yeah. So we'll continue the Ali T saga as updates develop. Yes, thank you everybody for listening. You can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify. We're on Stitcher. You can download us through any podcasting app that you so wish to use. You can listen to us every couple of weeks when it comes out on your phone. I imagine everyone listens to phones. I used to listen on iTunes on my laptop as well. I would do that often, but that's when you could sync, right? Because I would sync between...
Oh my god, I went through a phase of that. I'd listen to podcasts on my phone. I'd be then on my laptop. I'd sync until... And then I'd go on my laptop and then, I'm going out again. Better sync back to my phone. It's like, what is this world we're living in?
Yeah, I also do some sicko mode stuff now, which is like I start a Kind of Funny Games daily on my computer, on my second monitor, and I'm like 38 minutes in, and then I'm going to bed, so I download it on my phone, skip to 38 minutes in, and continue it on my phone, which is more manual of a process, but still works for what my purposes are. So anyway, that's going to do us. Thanks everyone so much for listening. We'll be back next time with some more podcasting and some more Nintendo. Till then, goodbye. The musical interlude used on today's show was The Darkest of Souls from Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. Copyright Ubisoft 2024.